Okay, good morning. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being with us this morning here in this session about the future of migration. We are starting a little bit delay, but we have to finish around 12, and I hope that we will have a good discussion with our panelists here this morning. Very relevant panelists here with us. I will introduce them. Right now, we have Mayor Yvonne Akisaya, the Mayor of Freetown, Mr. Michael Spindeleger, the General Director of International Center for Migration and Policy Development. Thank you for being with us. Jill Helk, Director of International Cooperation and Partnership from the International Organization of Migration, for Migration. Madame Souad Abdelrahim, Mayor of Tunis. Monsieur Omar Hajira, Mayor of Oujda, Mr. Pablo Jurado, le président de Congo-P, l'association des régions, the Region Association from Ecuador, and Mr. Hussein Keskin, Mayor of Sultan Bey in Turkey. Thank you all for being with us. Well, the first question is for the Mayor of Freetown. More and more people around the world will be displaced due to climate change, but also due to political conflicts. What actions should be taken at the level of local authorities and also at the level of the international community to keep as many people as possible on the ground?
Thank you very much, Mohammed. So the question speaks to what in the Global Compact for Migration are described as the structural factors. And it's refreshing to have the conversation start with this, as opposed to starting with what do we do to welcome migrants. I think the answer is clear to all of us who are in local government, all of us who are working with increased populations. In my context, we see a rapid urbanization, a rapid growth, 4.2% per annum, which is driven from rural to the city. What do? You need to actually, like in every context, whether it's international or national, you need to make provision for those coming in. So that means access to services, whether it's health, it's education, it's housing. It means more investment in urban planning. And in order to do these investments, it means access to resources. So the biggest challenge that we face, because your question was what needs to be done by the local authorities, well, the local authorities need to accommodate. But the second part of your question is what needs to be done by national authorities, and that's where the question of financing comes in. And that's not just for the national, but that's also for the international. The challenges of accommodating, integrating, and making sure that there is room for migrants needs financing. At the same time, addressing those structural factors. You said climate change. So there's a lot of work to be done with climate adaptation because you actually want to ensure that you minimize those numbers and don't put people in a position where there's forced migration. So investment in the services, the need for financing to be released to local government level, and ensuring that we're actually addressing those structural factors, working on climate change adaptation and reduction of greenhouse emissions.
Thank you, Yvonne. Jill, we know that there is now a good relation, let's say, good synergies between OIM and the network of local authorities. But we need to see clearly what is the new architecture of the UN for the follow-up of the Global Compact on migration to articulate in coherent way the different agencies working on this topic. What is the new architecture that OIM is putting in place, the UN is putting in place to tackle this question of migration?
Thank you, Mohammed, and good morning. The Secretary General of the United Nations decided during the course of the process of leading up to the adoption of the Global Compact on Migration to have a reflection inside the United Nations on how it was going to deal with migration It's a very important topic, and the UN had dealt with it in a rather piecemeal way up to that point, even not really discussing migration as migration, but only as migration and development over recent years. IOM joined the United Nations system in September 2016 on the same occasion as the New York Declaration was adopted. And so the circumstances, including global circumstances, had changed, and the Secretary General was going through a big reform process within the UN. The internal reflection resulted in a decision that a network should be created called the United Nations Network on Migration, with IOM as its coordinator and secretariat. And during the course of the months leading up to the adoption of the Global Compact, various preparatory meetings were taking place, and the Global Compact itself recognizes in the text and I think welcomes or endorses the Secretary General's decision to create the network, including with IOM as its coordinator and secretariat. The network has an executive committee of 8 agencies, and the full network of UN entities that belong to it consists of 38 entities. That's a lot. The network has created a work plan and has been dividing its work into various thematic areas, some global, some more thematic, and work has begun on those, and the network is beginning to speak with one voice and organize itself at regional and local levels. So the UN reform, which is making everybody work better together at country level, is also having an impact on enabling the network to create jointness at country level of the UN entities working on migration. But the network is also very aware, and the Global Compact itself shows that it's not only states, it's states who made the commitments in the Global Compact, but the implementation of the Global Compact as the implementation of the migration-relevant SDGs requires all of society approach, all of government. And the Global Compact itself is one of the first documents that really explicitly recognizes the role of local authorities and the importance of them to making migration a positive thing. So the network, although it only consists of UN entities, is in its thematic work streams and at country level involving many more actors, private sector, academia, civil society, and local authorities, because that's the only way that implementation of the GCM and the SDGs is going to work effectively.
Thank you very much, Jill. Madame la maire de Tunis.
Mayor of Tunis, the question I would like to ask you is, what are the tools, what are the methods, financial, institutional, and technical resources that a city like Tunis might need to be able to assure good governance of migration, and who are the public or private partners, the players that you can use to help manage migration to ensure that you have cohesion, territorial cohesion on this question? Thank you very much. First of all, let me just make the point that in Tunisia, it is local government that has been just elected. The new political class in local government does not really have a lot of experience in managing migration as a problem. Although we have that proximity, we're there, we can listen, we still have to resolve the problem of people who are just out there languishing in the street. But up to now, we have not had the possibility to do this. We haven't had the support or even any program supporting us that could help the councils, municipal institutions to help us. These people need support. Every single day we face this problem. And that is why I would like to emphasize here from this stage and say this very clearly, that we have to engage the mayors, local councillors, elected officials in migration because the problem can never just be considered to be a security problem at all. It goes beyond that. It's a problem of substance. It's about human management. It's a problem that needs to be solved not through political strategies that are national, but also at a local level. We could also have those support programs. We have some experience. We were just appointed last year. We had a support program to try and deal with illegal immigration, an economic program, which was a major and that is circular economy. The circular economy program is all about trying to help those people who would still like to actually set sail, to cross the sea to the other side of the Mediterranean. You see, every single day we have these death boats that are trying to cross the Mediterranean with migrants, and we need to find financial, economic solutions. And for our local government, we need to have some sort of support program through foundations, NGOs. Up to now, it's really just been independent entities that have helped us. So we haven't been able to do any direct first hands-on management of this problem. It's usually the state that does that, and even cooperation projects in parallel to international cooperation projects. This is a problem, though, that has to be resolved on the ground with economic projects. And it's not just a security issue. Please let me say that again. Thank you.
Multi-stakeholder partnership is one of the approaches advocated to improve migration governance at the local level. How can donors, the international community and the civil society complement and strengthen the local action?
Thank you very much, Mohamed. Ladies and gentlemen, let me say welcome to you to this session. First of all, I think this is an interesting question because working a lot with states, you see that states are very much focusing on national policy. This is something that's very clear, but on the other hand, if you are going to look from the angle of consequences, you see that all the local levels, especially the municipalities, are very much touched by all these decisions not being involved in decision making. And this is one of the problems of our time, I think. You see, if you have a look to European Union, that there is always a council deciding about something. Then, of course, the national legislation is going to make decisions concerning the laws, but where are the local levels involved in this decision-making process? So this is a lack, what we can see today. And I think for future, we have, especially by funding and by donors, to integrate the local level from the beginning on. I think this is really needed. Otherwise, you will feel the consequences and you will have a look if it is working or not, but this is then too late. So I think this is the one big issue for the future, to integrate local level in decision making. Of course, it's very different from country to country who is responsible for what. You have in the federal countries sometimes also the regional level with some competencies, but to integrate those who feel the consequences on the ground, I think this is always a need for the future. So this is the one point I would like to make, and the other is I think cooperation between the local level over the countries, like in an organization we have here. You see LG is one of those bodies where you can cooperate for the future. But I think on the other hand, you have also to establish programs that are contributing to this. Like we make as ICMPD this Mediterranean city-to-city migration program. I think this is one of the main issues where you connect different cities in different countries just to have an exchange of experience. You never have to invent the wheel every time again. If you can learn from the experience of others, I think this is one of the main issues for the future. And if you have a donation for that, if you have a program, if you have an international body organizing this kind of exchange of experience, this is really something where you can make a step forward.
Thank you very much. Indeed, we need to build these multi-stakeholder approaches to face the governance of migration and to respond to the needs of local authorities, kind of coalition around local authorities, the national level, the civil society, and also, I think, the private sector, because the jobs and the employment are very important for the integration and the inclusion of migrants in the society. We are going to move to the other side of the panel. So my question is for Mr. Hajira, Omar Hajira, the mayor of Oujda in Morocco. Monsieur le maire,
Mayor, what can local authorities do today? What can they do to be a counterweight to that perhaps security perspective taken by states? How can we have a more rights-based approach and ensure we leave no one behind, as the saying goes? How do you see this question, that rights-based approach with regard to the migrants in your city? Good morning to you all. I did, of course, want to start off by thanking you very much for giving my city the chance to be here. Let me explain, first of all, where my city is. Oujda is in a geostrategic location. It's 14 kilometers from Algiers. It's the capital. It's very close to the Mediterranean. We're the capital of our region. And we have a migration history. The eastern region has always been an immigrant region. We have a lot of migrants that have gone to Europe. 25% of the Moroccan diaspora originally come from the eastern region of Morocco, and particularly Oujda, our city. Now, things are changing today, though. We have started to become a reception or host city because we're on the border. So now we are the ones taking in migrants. 10% of the migrants stay in our region. And out of that 10%, 80% actually live in my city. They stay here. And I could also add to that information that migration is really a rural exodus. Because of climate change, what we're seeing today, there is a lot of immigration towards cities from the country, particularly to ours. How could we be that counterweight is the question for me. First of all, I would underscore that under the King's Royal Decree, we have developed a legal framework in our national policies on migration. The rights of man, participative democracy, decentralization, and of course the advanced regionalization that we have. I think that local and regional governments have a major role that they can play in their own territories, because they are the first contact point for these migrants. They are the ones that deliver proximity services, health, transport, for instance, and it always has to be based on human rights as an approach. Our city, Oujda, is the first point of call because this is a new era. We're now becoming this host city, as I said. We've changed, and we've done a diagnosis, and we've actually put migration into our local government program for the next 5 years for the first time. Thank you very much. We will be able to go back in more detail to the policies in which you integrated migration. Thank you, Mayor.
Mr. Pablo Jurado from Congope. As a consortium of provincial government, Congo-P represents a territorial entity, halfway between the national and the local levels. How is migration managed at this scale, and what role does it play as a link between the other level of government in your country?
Bueno, muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, and good morning to my fellow panelists. Ecuador has, over recent years, been having to face a consequence because a reality that is very much linked to what's happening in our sister country, Venezuela. Venezuela is obviously a political and economic question, isn't it? Well, we had a similar problem before because of social and armed conflict. And at that time, it was with our sister Republic of Colombia. And that has meant that the European Union in particular and other NGOs have really been looking at the border. We have about 500,000 Venezuelans, both men and women, whole families even, who are coming to Ecuador from Venezuela. And what we believe and what we understand is that our constitution acknowledges universal citizenship. But one thing is what the constitution says. It's another matter what can happen in reality. So we have called on international cooperation to help us with funding. And now we're working on specific projects, particularly awareness-raising campaigns in the different territories. In Ecuador, we have a group of 4 provinces that work together. They are on the border with our sister Republic of Colombia to avoid xenophobia, which is one of our big worries. It's not just about finance. We think we need intercultural exchanges. It's still a concern for us, and that's why we are doing advocacy. We are doing awareness raising in our territories so that our fellow citizens can understand that this is not necessarily a problem. It's just a natural phenomenon that we are experiencing in our country, and unfortunately, in the Andean community, which is a group of South American countries, there is not a very clear vision, even though we have a global agreement that supposedly governs us with regard to the inclusive policies that we are supposed to develop. We're supposed to understand that this is a human problem because, okay, today it's them, but maybe tomorrow it's us. We, too, may also have economic problems. And often, in the past, we saw our own people go off to Italy or Spain as migrants. So we have these different levels, local government, regional government, and those regional groupings. We're having to deal with this as a reality. It's not a problem for us. It's an opportunity for development. Thank you very much.
Hussein Keskin from Sultan Bey in Turkey. The issues of human mobility are now understood only from the point of view of immigration. Does this vision neglect the challenges faced by the cities facing large flows of immigration, and what local, national, and international tools are available to these cities?
Thank you very much, Mr.
Birkaç dakikalık sunumumla cevap vereyim. USCG'nin kıymetli eş başkanı, değerli başkanlarımız, Türkiye heyeti, kıymetli katılımcılar, saygıdeğer panelistler, moderatörümüz, hepinizi saygıyla selamlıyorum. Sizlere Türkiye'den, İstanbul'dan, ilçem Sultanbeyli'den selamlar getirdiğimi özellikle ifade etmek istiyorum. Değerli katılımcılar, göç olgusunu...
Dear participants, migration is not a problem of today, but it is a problem that you can actually have from the beginning of the humanity. From the very early times, people always had to move to other countries because of hunger, wars, or some other reasons. Unfortunately, not many things have changed ever since. Today, we are still experiencing similar problems. Because of different religious, cultural, or political backgrounds, there are conflicts, and now migration is becoming a part of our life. There is something that we should underline. This is not an issue which can be squeezed into some political arguments. This is important in terms of redefining humanity. Asylum is a right, and asylum seekers are the right owners. And it is a necessity of positive law. If migration is managed appropriately, it is actually useful for the countries and the communities. Therefore, we should understand that each country has their own dynamics, and I would like to mention those dynamics in this meeting. I am the mayor as of 31st of October in 2019. I am the mayor of a district. I am coming from the country hosting 3,680,603 refugees, 3.6 million. We have an awareness coming from our history, and under the leadership of our President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, we are owning our moral and ethical values. Therefore, we are showing the entire humanity that we have enough place for everyone who are taking refuge in our country. Actually, this is the biggest lesson given to the humanity which has been corrupted all around the world. In order to decrease the tension arising because of the migration, we are conducting a successful migration management. Let me tell you briefly what we do in our district. I want to talk about the refugees associations which has been established in affiliation with our municipality. In Sultanbeyli, we are hosting 30,000 refugees from 21 different countries. As you can imagine, a great majority of this number are our Syrian brothers and sisters. Those refugees who are taking refuge in our country are not discriminated from our own citizens. We are doing our best to provide them with the most humane conditions. At the beginning, they had some conflicts, they had some challenges about their big numbers and about their needs. Because of that difficulties, we decided to create an organized structure. There is a xenophobia or a refugee phobia in our country as well, just like in the rest of the world. But we had to show them that we have big enough heart for all those people. Therefore, we have decided a coordination structure in our city with the participation of public authorities and NGOs. As Sultanbeyli municipality, we have registered the information of our refugees in a database. Under the light of this information, we can better identify the needs of those people, and we better coordinate the assistance that we are going to provide to them. NGOs, public organizations, universities, and volunteers participated in 4 workshops in our city to decide what to be done. And we made some urgent decisions, and we created our general coordination. Just like the mayors have mentioned, the first thing that we had is we have created a refugee coordination center. Then we registered the data of all refugees in our city. And we have collected some social and demographic data. We have created a database and automation system. Once we created our institutional structure, we started to come up with projects who will cater the needs of refugees. Therefore, we have organized some surveys in all neighborhoods of our city who are speaking Arabic. So we have created a database called SUCOM. Thanks to SUCOM, the database, we managed to make needs analysis, and we actually prevented the repetition of the same activities to same people. Therefore, we had a better registration system. We needed to do that. The registration is very important because it gives us the accurate data, and we had a chance to cater the needs of these people one-to-one basis. The biggest challenge that we faced, which has also been mentioned by the panelists, the local authorities do not have a legislation, internal legislation about refugees. Therefore, we do not have a budget for that. We cannot allocate enough an amount of resources since it is not our core business. And therefore, we have created an association, and this association is providing all these services without having any public resources. Can I move on, or can I continue in the second round?
In your speech, and I want to give the floor to the young lady, Grace, which is she's from young refugee from Congo, and she's living here in Durban, in South Africa. And I want her to give us a small opinion of what you have heard this morning from the panelists. You as young refugees here in South Africa.
May I answer in French? Of course you can. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers for asking me to join you at this event, so that I could be here representing migrants and refugees who are here in South Africa. I've seen that local authorities in different cities all over the world do work that we really should appreciate, and we have to congratulate them. I think they give us lots of good examples here. When you come to a country, when you're fleeing from your own country, like I did, then you have no protection, no security there. And when you get to the new country, you want to see how there are similar practices all over in different countries in the local governments. They make sure that children and young people feel comfortable. So, okay, you're asking about my reaction, and maybe I could give you my own conclusions from what I've understood this morning. I think that we need more continuity. We need, as refugees, to feel we are at home in the country, to feel comfortable, that no one turns their backs on us and reject us. That we need to have these organizations to help children. It's so wonderful to see that. Thinking about children, I was in another session about children in the street before, and that is a really big issue. There are so many children who sleep in the streets outside here in South Africa, and I know that there are NGOs and organizations that every year try and raise that issue, and I do hope there will be some big change in the world soon. Thank you. Thank you very much, Grace. I will of course give you back the floor if you like. Perhaps you could tell about your own story. Thank you. Later, maybe.
Michael Spindeleger, we know that the ICMPD is composed of member states, and do national migration policy strategies need the local level for better implementation? Because we, as organization of local authorities, we don't want to be only implementers. We want also to sit at the table to discuss the strategy.
I think this is one of the really sensitive issues for the future, and I totally agree. If you would like to involve those who are affected by policy, you should bring them on the table when you start to build up your national strategy. I think there's issues what we can do as an international organization working with states in starting a discussion about strategy for the future. So, of course, we can involve the local level. We can bring them and ask about the consequences, about their experience so far. I think this is most important because if you are integrating and you would like to integrate thousands of people, you have to bring them to school, you have to start with housing, you have especially on the local level to bring together the interest of
But do you understand the position of local authorities when they said that we cannot implement something that we don't decide before? I think, am I right, Madam Mayor? So they need to be I mean, in the beginning, in the discussion and the elaboration of strategy.
Yes, you're right, but it's a decision that you have to make on the national level. And if you have organizations like European Union, you have to start with the discussion in the Council of European Union. If you are then ready to integrate the local level, of course you can do it, but this is a political decision and a political process you have to start. But from my experience, I think more and more people are recognizing that, because latest when you have bad experience on the ground, of course you have to do it in another way.
Thank you, Michael. Even in the same sense, in the recent years, we have seen the growing of interest of international organizations at the local level. However, is the local level seen as a real interlocutor or simply an implementer?
Thank you very much. Michael, I think the way you responded speaks exactly to the point that's being made here. We continue to have the discourse where the international players and the national players see the conversation as happening between them, and then when they're ready, if they can make space, they'll ask the local governments to get involved in implementation. And the point I think that we really need to address squarely is that appreciation of what needs to be done, of how policy needs to be defined, of how resources need to flow, needs to be done with the local authorities who are implementing, who are there on the ground as part of the conversations from the start. And that's been the missing piece. And I just want to pick up on comments made by colleagues from different angles, the mayors from Tunisia, from Morocco, from Turkey. What you hear is about cities that become cities of transit, cities that have become now cities of destination. And I just want us to reflect on where this all starts again. So in my context, the biggest challenge that I'm facing in my city is rural-urban migration. But when there is an inability within a country to accommodate, to provide services, to address the reasons why those moves happen, the next step is to make the very dangerous journey out of my country to Tunisia, to Morocco, because people then think their only hope is going to the West. In the case of Grace, she's fleeing conflict. So it comes back to those structural factors. People are moving because they're looking for better economic opportunities in countries and then out to other countries. They're moving because they're fleeing conflict. They're moving because climate change hasn't been addressed, and therefore they're unable to make a living or feel safe in their home country. When do we begin to really put serious money on the table to address these issues? When are we actually going to start investing heavily in climate change adaptation within the countries that are most vulnerable, and those are the countries of the South? When are we really going to tackle the issues of conflict, which have made Grace leave? We're not talking about that here. We're talking about making sure we have more schools, more housing, and we can help the cities that she is forced to go to. And I just really would like us to not shy away from the structural factors. What is driving migration? So 2 points in conclusion. One, local governments are at the heart of any solution, as my colleague mayors have so eloquently described. And therefore, those policies cannot just be something we look at and hope that one day somebody gives us some money. Two, let's not shy away I know it's 20, 30, 50 years of these conversations, but if conflict is going on in DRC as has been happening for the last 30 plus years, many more graces will be fleeing. So we really need to look at those, and we also need to look at investment in climate change and investment in climate adaptation. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Yvonne. Yeah, you can applaud. Jill, 1 year after the adoption of the Global Compact on Migration, can we have a kind of first assessment of to determine whether the tools are and partners are in place for the implementation of the Global Compact? Where are we on the roadmap to the first forum for migration review in 2022?
May I first pick up on some of the comments that have been made? We have been advocating for mayors to be included in national delegations to conferences taking decisions that impact on local authorities. And during the course of the preparations for the Global Compact, there were a number of countries that did include mayors in their delegations, and we hope that this will catch on, because, as you say, what's the point of only being told afterwards what the decisions have been made if you could have been at the table helping make the right decisions? One of the things we also do regularly in countries is try to ensure that there are mechanisms for regular consultation between national governments and local authorities, because again, policies are being made at national level that impact local authorities. And this also impacts how national governments use language. In many cases, national governments allocate resources to localities, regions, cities, based on the number of citizens in those cities. But what cities are dealing with are not just citizens, they are inhabitants, including a large number of people who are not citizens. And resources have to reflect the number of people that cities are actually having to manage, not just the number of citizens. On the Global Compact, the network is working to build capacity of governments to develop national implementation plans for implementation of the Global Compact for those countries that are interested. The UN itself, in any case, is working on supporting countries to implement the Sustainable Development Goals, of which many are relevant to migration. And so the work on the GCM and the SDGs is going very much hand in hand. As IOM, we also work with national governments on what their priorities are and what they should be doing. We have a program called the Migration Governance Indicators, where we work with national authorities to assess their migration policies, what the strengths and weaknesses are, and what they might be doing. And more recently, we've been also doing this at the local level. We piloted in 3 cities, Accra, Montreal, and Sao Paulo, which were countries that we had already done the national assessment. And it was fascinating to see how national governments had looked at the assessment and decided what their priorities were, and then to see how the same issues were viewed by a city and how the city saw those national policies and strengths and weaknesses and whether they were the same or not. We're rolling this out. We've done 52 countries and we're going to be doing a good deal more, but this was originally started to help with the implementation of the migration-related SDGs, and now it's very much geared to supporting the implementation of the Global Compact. The Global Compact itself foresaw that there would be this global review every 4 years, but every 2 years there would be a regional review of implementation. So the first set of regional reviews will be coming up next year. That's very quickly. How the regions will review the implementation is still really for the regions to decide, because there are regional economic commissions, there are regional consultative processes, there are a lot of regional bodies that could be looking at national implementation and issues that are of regional or sub-regional relevance. But it's going to be a busy year next year, and I think will help highlight what countries that have really got off the starting line and have really set off at a good pace have been doing, compared with those countries that have been sitting around just talking. But clearly, by the time the global forum to review implementation of the GCM comes along in 2022, we hope that a lot more countries will have done more and will have seen the importance of working with local authorities to get to real implementation of the GCM.
Thank you, Jill. Yes, I'm going to Madame la Maire de Tunis.
Mayor of Tunis, let me go back to you. Madam, you have two hats really. You're the Mayor of Tunis, but you're also the President of the National Federation of Tunisian Cities, aren't you? I have really two questions for you. The same point really, but the role that your federation can play, what is it? Can you help the national level, the state, to develop better its institutional framework, its policy to bringing in municipal areas there? That's the first part of the question. The second part is about international cooperation. What do you need to be able to strengthen your own international cooperation with other networks? How could you advance that cooperation and so that you could perhaps get more help with regard to your needs at a municipal level with the immigration? Thank you for those questions. And as President of our National Federation of Tunisian Cities, well, of course, I am a representative of cities. We have to defend our cities' interests. We have to have solidarity among us, and we need to be there. We need to be present. That is a requirement. We need to be there in any city strategy framework. We're actually designing our city's strategy now, and I really am happy to be on this panel because you're right. Ideas come down to us directly from above, but we now have to try and launch a new migratory policy strategy from a different level. We are not, as in Tunisia, really a host country. We're not a destination country. We're more, we're a departure country and also a transit country. But it really doesn't matter. The problems are the same. You need to have a strategy, and so to have a strategy, you need to have an impact study. That's a problem. But I agree with you. Right now, the time is right. And you've also actually sent out this call to us, to local governments. You've asked us to get directly involved in the management of our migrants, but also in a human context, because this is all about being human and inclusive cities. And of course, the challenges are different depending on what territory you're talking about. There are sometimes there is a direct impact on the local governments. And if there is, there must be more cooperation between the people in charge in the cities of the cities people the migrants are leaving from and where they're arriving to. We need to give each other support, and we need to listen to the citizens, and we need to be able to alleviate their suffering. You talked about suffering before. We need to alleviate their suffering. We need to allow them to develop, but they need to have some way of self-development. In Tunisia, we have a cooperation program on this. We want to help our young people, so we select young people, and they can go to Italy and have work experience, and then we help them to set up their own businesses. We need our young people in Tunis. We need young people in innovation, intelligence, know-how. We need to be able to give them a reason to stay and help contribute to the development of their own city. So we are open to them, and we are open to any partnership that can help us to have a strategy that will work to be able to stop people leaving as immigrants. We think that cities in the north can help us. We should be able to launch a dialogue, a debate on new forms of partnership, strengthening the migratory governance, a multidisciplinary dialogue with a number of different stakeholders, public, private sectors, and a strong presence of civil society too. We must not ever overlook or forget failures in other countries. We need to understand that failures are lessons for us and not avoid them. I could also tell you that we have to protect migrants. We need to devise a human-based migratory policy for our cities, respecting human rights, ensuring that we have social cohesion in our inclusive cities. To do that, we need solidarity. We need all mayors to work together, because we're all dealing with the same problems, aren't we? In local government, we are the ones, the first responders. We're close to those people who need our help, and we need to be there for them. It's true that strategies can differ, policies can differ. As you move from one city to another or from one country to another, but we as mayors are the ones who have to put things in practice, and we are pragmatic and practical. We need to be there very close to the people. We are the ones that need to troubleshoot. We need to solve the day-to-day problems of the people who live in our cities. Thank you very much, Madam. Let me give you the floor, sir. Mr. Jurado, let me ask you, what type of partnerships could there be between the local and national authorities? What about you and your countries? You talked yourself before about building up an institution for migrants, and you're working at a state level. I mean, what collaboration could work locally and nationally? Thank you. First of all, let me say that the first thing is that the world is changing. It's moving around, and migrants too, and there is migration between us and Europe and Canada and America. This is a new world. It's a world that is moving all the time, and we need to ensure that migration is a priority policy. And we need to think about how to manage that policy. I should also highlight that in the frame of international cooperation with European countries or with those organizations that are dealing with migration, we need to go beyond the evaluation phase. We need to move into the action phase. We've evaluated, but it's time to really get into the action. We don't need support and assistance. We need European countries to be there. We are getting migrants coming to us, and they then want to move on, but at the moment they're with us. So we need investors to be brought here. We need wealth to be created. They need to help us to generate wealth so that we can create jobs, because we cannot do this alone. We cannot face this new phenomenon on our own in our cities. As for our policies today, as you said, we've done a study on the profile of migrants. We're doing that really in city, and we are with the International Centre for the Development of Policies in Migration, UCLG, and others. We are working on this counselling or reception centre for migrants. We have unanimously, during our last local government meeting, decided to set up a facility like that for our city. The departments concerning migration will build a facility that will be for migrants in two directions: the migrants that are coming to us and migrants who are Moroccan who are leaving to go abroad. So we're setting up a coordination unit in our local government in Uja. So we are in a process of change. We are trying to really understand that there's a new concept for us. We're now a destination city. We're a host city. We're no longer a departure city. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Jurado again now. The question is, you have an open dialogue. Do you have that open dialogue between your different levels of government, local, provincial, and the central state? Does it exist? Thank you very much. First, let me just highlight the vision of the lady here who's in South Africa, who was told about her coming over from Congo. Let me tell you that Ecuador is one of the few countries that has a human mobility law. My province, which is very close to our sister Republic of Colombia, is one of the very few provinces that also has its own public policy on this matter. In other words, we have a rule, a regulation, a law that says that all different institutions have to also work to help the migrants, not just migrants coming to us, because Ecuador is one of the South American countries that also has migrants who come back to us because a lot of those people who left are now coming back to Ecuador as returnees. We work very closely with our Foreign Affairs Ministry and with the Ombudsman as well, and with our National Police Force on migration. We also work with our Welfare, Social and Economic Inclusion Ministry, which of course is a national ministry. We work also with the Republic Presidency. And so altogether what we've done is devise, and I agree with what you've all been saying too, that we've been devising something together, because more than ever before, it is our responsibility to work in partnership. We have to set up linkages between what we're doing, because we are all working towards the same ultimate goal, and that is to respond to those families who, for one reason or another, have ended up coming to our country. We've said, haven't we, that we shouldn't just depend on the national policy, because the national government has very much a bird's eye view. We are the ones there living firsthand, seeing firsthand the reality. We're on the ground. We are the mayors, or we're the governors. We also in Ecuador have what we call parish council, which is a much smaller territorial administrative division. We need to all unite, join in a community almost. That there are 4 provinces that we form part of a group together in the north of Ecuador, and it's up to us to work together to come up with a response, an immediate response that will also help us when we're asking for assistance from the EU or the UN. And because today we understand that it's from abroad, they're not going to actually give us individual help. What they like to see are territorial units getting together and looking for solutions to the problem and asking for help jointly. The region national government contact is constant on this, and in Congope we would like at least 6 monthly assessments to be made. We don't want a year to go by or 2 years to go by until and only then realize the mistakes that we've been making. The mistakes that we're making have to be identified very, very quickly so that we can actually make changes to our agenda and how we're helping migrants. So I would also like to take advantage of this opportunity to invite you 20 to 24th of January next year, 2020, Quito, which is a World Heritage City, will be will host the Migration and Development World Forum. We would like you to come and help us to build up the Quito Declaration then. And we don't want it just to be a declaration on paper. Let me stress that we need to have constant accountability and report on what we're doing and what we're not doing, and always thinking about the human dimensions. Thank you very much. Yes, we did know that you would be holding a conference in January. We're working together with IOM and our colleagues in the Migration Council to prepare that cities forum in Quito. Thank you.
Mayor of Sultan Bey from Turkey. We know that the role of local authorities is different from one country to another, and depending also on whether you are in departure, transit, or host territory. So how can we work together, all these different cases, and strengthen the cooperation between local authorities, because some they have an experience of hosting cities, and some are transit. So how can we local authorities work together to have a common vision on the on local strategy of migration?
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. As our colleague, the mayor, said that it is time to take action. This is very important, and I need to highlight this. And together with this, we have prepared our analysis, and it is time for action. In our international organizations such as UN, and in their gatherings and meetings and summits, when we completed our presentation, participants from Europe, the mayors, our colleagues, said that you are talking about what you have accomplished in your presentations, and it was very nice to hear your accomplishments. And as per your question, Turkey, the Republic of Turkey, as you may know, is very close to Iraq and Syria. We have neighboring borders with these countries, and therefore we are hosting a high number of refugees. But also, we are also a transit country where refugees try to go to other countries. Thousands of our sisters and brothers have died in our borders and in our seas while they're crossing the Mediterranean Sea. And as Sultanbeyli municipality, in our center of refugees, one of the things that we accomplished so far is that we had a strong team which managed the migration and the refugee flow. And we have created a database for this, a software. And the third one is that, as you may well know, one of the most important things is that we are in close contact with international non-governmental organizations and civil society organizations. And as per regulations, we have we can see some problems in our neighboring districts as well. And from the beginning of the refugee flow, we also amended our regulations. Since we couldn't have a budget from our national strategy, we are looking for international non-governmental organizations for their funds. If you can find a suitable one, if you can create a development project, then you can find the financial assistance from international organizations or NGOs, from UN, for example, from EU, from IOM, so that you can create your own programs even if you don't have national budgets for these activities. And thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. Before you say, I want to conclude my remarks.
I have a question for all the panelists. One question we will start answering from Yvonne and on. How can we change our perceptions of and our approaches about migration? And our concern today in UCLG is to build a new narrative on migration. So how can we change this perception of migration?
Oh, and you're assuming that we have to change the perception of migration because there's a negative connotation now. And I guess maybe I'm going to answer your question a little bit differently and take it from the angle of the fact that, generally speaking, the largest focus on the conversation is given to migration from the perspective of international migration, whereas the reality is that 70% plus of migration that happens is internal migration, rural to urban. And therefore, I think, you know, how we can change it with having local city voices continue to emphasize the importance of addressing the structural factors that drive migration. We all know migration is a phenomenon. It's an age-old phenomenon. It's been happening since the start of the world. I myself, I'm the great-great-great-great-granddaughter of migrants of a very different nature because I'm a Creole. I'm the descendant of freed slaves who left Nova Scotia and went and resettled in Africa and started what is now known as Freetown in 1792. So, you know, migrants come in all different shapes and sizes and all different forms. And the concept of migration, many people know, most cities, most countries have been built, they often say, off the back of migrants. But what we're facing today is a situation where my concern is migration that is forced. And in dealing with that forced migration, when it's, you know, I studied abroad, I worked abroad. Am I a migrant? Was I a migrant at that time? People who live in other countries call themselves expats, and yet they look at other people and call them migrants, depending on their socioeconomic positioning. And what lies at the heart of that is that the one who's the expat had a choice, or is perceived to have a choice, and the one who is seen as a migrant had to move because they had no option in some regards. And actually that could be a perception question as well. Where does this all go to? Migration is such a big topic. Can you distill it into very simple one-liners? Probably not. But my favorite focus, because I think the space is just not given enough attention, is this. Urban migration is something that we need to give attention to. We need to ensure that local governments are in a position to participate in defining policy, accessing revenue. And to the mayor of Turkey, it's not that we don't have access to resources. It's a question, again, of scale. Our Transform Freetown agenda, which has as its heart issues around resilience, climate change, you know, adaptation, but also job creation, skills development. These are all financed programs that we're implementing in our city to improve jobs, to make opportunities, to invest in schools. But it's a question of scale, and it's a question of direct access. Must I engage through the national government, because that's where the World Bank and ADB work? Should we not have more multilateral agencies engaging directly with city governments so that they can access funding without having to go through the loops? Because not all national governments and city governments see eye to eye, because you have political differences as well. So it's about making sure that we're addressing the challenges to make it easier for cities, local authorities who are dealing with these issues, who are trying to make these investments, trying to address the structural factors, making it easier for them to access capital, but also for them to be part of the discussions of policies that then become the compacts that the world is held accountable to.
Thank you very much. I think that's very clear. Narrative of migration will not change automatically. You have to use international forums, okay, but you have to use windows of opportunity. At the moment, I think what we can see in Europe, a new commission is coming up. The president of the new commission said she would like to put in place a new strategy for migration. So this is the moment where you can change something, especially when new persons are starting their new job in the European Commission. This is the time to give some input. So what I've heard today, of course, to involve more the local level could be one of the issues where we can also support you to bring this to the level of European Union. And the second issue, I think it's most important for the whole future of migration, is to bring in the private sector. I think investments are needed. You said it, Mayor, it's I think in every city the same. And the private sector can bring workplaces, of course, they can create jobs, and to involve them in giving them, I don't know, guarantees for political risk, giving them something from international community as well as from the local level, I think this would be a need that they are really starting businesses. But this can change something on the ground, and we have to think about different strategies how to make it happen, that private sector is more involved, and this, of course, can change something for the future.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Perceptions are perceptions, and we know, unfortunately, that facts don't have much impact on changing perceptions. Europe sees itself as the destination of all migrants. Of course, it's not. More people move within Africa than move from Africa to Europe or from everywhere to Europe. So I think we still have to use facts, but I do think that it is placing the human face of migrants with people that has more impact. A lot of people who are supposedly anti-migrant have lots of migrants who are friends, but they don't see them as migrants because they're friends. The labels can be a problem, and I think we have to get people to see people as people and not as the inhabitants of some label that is attached to them. My own solution is that everyone should have a DNA test so that those who think they are so pure will find out that they are actually from all over the place.
Thank you.
If I could summarize this issue, I think we should talk, engage, move on to the action phase, as my colleague said, but always with concrete, tangible projects to set up jobs, create jobs for our young people, for those young people who want to cross that sea. We have to do it for their welfare, to be able to allow them to lead normal lives here. So I think we need a database, essentially, a database to be able to draw in and attract investors from the private sector, to make the private sector participate in the whole process in this field, and we also need to make them stakeholders, helping us to manage the deficits that we have as we try and make our cities more human cities and make up for the human rights deficit. We need to have also strong presence of civil society, and above all, strategies that are well defined specifically for each country, because of course strategies vary from region to region. Even migration is different depending on the root cause of that migration. So we need to have that database, and then we need to call on the mayors to directly be involved in managing the problem of accommodation and jobs, and we have to be able to transfer know-how. Let me to talk to you about a rationale, a watchword really, but I think you're probably familiar with. But we need to go over and again to be wealthy and to live in security. You need to be able to ensure that both the middle classes and the poor are given the right conditions to live. But so we look at the other countries. Why, for other richer countries to be living comfortable lives, they need to make sure that other countries also have their comfortable lives and that they have possibility of development in those poorer countries. Today, we need the aid and assistance from the wealthier countries, from industrial countries. We need to create jobs and wealth back at home in our countries. Migrants go off to Madrid and Barcelona, but they are the ones that call on the richer countries to help them. We need that help from countries that have so much experience, Paris, Madrid, Barcelona, etc.
Es importante.
It's important for us as governments, authorities, to understand that the contact, the ongoing contact that immigrant migrants have is not necessarily with us as a government level, it's with their community. It's important for me in local government to really get down to a lower level to understand exactly what sort of life these people are living in the community. We need to ensure that their neighbours can start to have positive attitudes to migrants. We could see that. We as politicians and people in government might have a very clear view on migration, but down there on the ground, where people are really living, that is where there may be some collision there, and this is where we need to help them to get on together. In our consortium of provincial governments in Ecuador, which is at a regional level, we'll call prefects. I know in other countries they're called regional governments. Well, we call ourselves prefects at that regional level, and we in our consortium still stress that we at the top in the region level have to be linked, of course, to the local government level and also with the national government level. We believe that a multi-level action strategy is more and more urgent. I would also like to say that we do appreciate the work that is being done by UCLG to incorporate these new linkage mechanisms for us between different levels of government, because we can't get the right outcomes if we're doing things on our own in an isolated fashion and we don't give the migrants what they're expecting to get from us. At a regional level, we play a role giving legal advice. That is something else actually people ask for. They don't know where to go when they arrive in our countries. Maybe our reality is different from yours, as the colleague said. Maybe talked about Syria, and now I have just been last week in an EU meeting through GIZ. GIZ, the EU, the work that we're doing in Berlin, we're doing it in Leipzig and Munich. There are a lot of course, Syrian migrants arriving there. But the problem, of course, if the Syrians don't speak German, do they? And that's the very first problem migrants have when they arrive in a country. In South America, we don't have much problem because, of course, most countries in the Americas speak Spanish and understand it. So they don't have that first barrier that they come up against when they arrive in one of our countries, because they understand their language and they can get over that. But we're working on a multi-level policy action that should include this. In America and in Europe, I think perhaps you have more legislative development, but in South America and some other parts of the world, we still we haven't yet understood that we need to put this down into public policy terms. There are some countries that have come up with those solutions with degrees. We have our own ordinances, which are not necessarily open enough. They're imposing a reality. We all agree, don't we, that this is a problem we have as human beings. We could do, if we're not investing, we can build as many buildings as we like. If we're not investing in human beings, what were they here for? Thank you very much. Yes. Yes, language is definitely a barrier that we have to get over.
Thank you very much. While we are talking about migration, we are talking about migration from rural to urban areas, but also there are voluntary migration for many reasons. In any country, in any region, we are experiencing these examples, and in Turkey as well, we are seeing the similar cases. In Durban, there are also some Turkish people living here, and they open their own business, but our refugee young woman sister here, she's forced to flee her country. First of all, we need to understand the reasons of forced migration, the causes of forced migration, especially Western countries' perceptions on forced migration. But the civil society organizations and NGOs are more sincere to forced migration, and they are willing to work with forced migration issues. First of all, we need to overcome the reasons and the countries of forced migration. And in terms of migration, human is at the center. The conscience of human beings is at the center. Therefore, we need to we cannot see the race, religion, or any ethnic group of the people. We need to see them as human beings, as people, as individuals, and we need to host them, and we need to show our hospitality in our country. I think this is the biggest problem in very large areas of the world, because there are always conflicts and there are always challenges in many parts of the country. And when we look at the Western countries in Barcelona or in similar countries or cities, we see the differences in perception in terms of their approaches to migration and refugee. But when we have these discussions and dialogues, I'm sure that we will come onto the common grounds.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Maire.
Thank you very much, Mayor. I'd just like to remind you that we are preparing a document, this manifesto, which does, in fact, make reference to that Quito conference, and that is the Global Fund for Migration message there for January. Let me give the floor to Grace to finish off. You have 3 minutes to tell us a little about yourself. I know it's such an exciting topic, but if you could, in 3 minutes, summarize what your story is. Yes. Let me start off by saying that when I left my country, I was 12, and now I am 20. So I have been in this country for 8 years already now. Like anything in life, I've had good and bad experiences. My father wasn't involved because my parents were separated. But when I arrived here in this country, I was age 12, and I still had to help the country with my family with the financial problems that we had. It's different, of course, from Congo. We had to pay our bills, electricity, water, the transport to school. And my father wasn't there. If your father's not there, you get involved with the problems of the household, and you have to do something. And it was hard for me to help out there. But my mother was there, and she had a problem. And when you go to school, you think, will I get through it? And one day I said, one day I'm going to do something to change this situation in my family. And then the refugee social services helped me an awful lot with transport, food, school. But they can't always be there for you. You have to also find some livelihood for yourself. So they told me how to do that. They helped me to learn skills and craft work, and that is how I have been able to get by every day at the Durban. We go to the Durban flea market, and we sell there. I mean, to try and make money to go to university. And I can tell you how expensive university is. I have to study though. Most refugees give up education after secondary school because they said, oh gosh, it's all so expensive here, what am I going to do? But I said to myself, even if life is expensive, I am going to find a way to get by. And so I have found holiday work, I worked in restaurants, I worked in shoe shops, and I was able to go to university. I did my first year at university, and I also work 3 times a week to be able to have some money. So in a nutshell, I can tell you that the big problems that I myself have seen tend to be about papers. When you've got your papers, you know, when they say, oh, well, you're refugees, but you're still an asylum seeker, it's hard to get any opportunities. When I finished secondary school, I did French. Because out of Zulu and French, I chose French here. It was easier for me as a second language, and I did pretty well. And they asked me if I'd got my papers, and I said I'm still an asylum seeker, and I couldn't go off and study in France because I didn't have the papers, so I didn't get a scholarship. So I have had bad experiences, but I've also had good experiences when I got my diploma and when I saw how happy my mother was, because it was something that I had managed to get out of in life. It's not easy to get that certificate. When I got that, and as a refugee, and as a young girl, I do hope that this type of organization can help to change the lives of so many people everywhere in the world. Thank you. Thank you, Grace. Yes, you can give her a round of applause.
On peut l'applaudir, on te souhaite.
And of course, we wish you all the best in your university studies. I'd like to thank all of the panelists here. We will finish with an anecdote. Yvonne was talking about the fact that she also studied abroad, and I wasn't quite sure what she was. She was an expat or a migrant, but there's a joke and said, when you come from the north, you're an expat, but when you come from the south, you're a migrant, aren't you? That's the way it tends to work. I believe that summarizes pretty well the situations on migration. Thank you for joining us here. Thank you for sharing your experiences and your own views on migration. I do think we'll be able to work with the IOM and with other partners and the members of UCLGU on migration. Once again, thank you on behalf of us. You can give them a round of applause, yes.